I feel rather like, I feel rather like what I am representing, children's books in this galaxy of, you know, hot shots from the world of literature. I mean, high-flying literature. So I'll be like the little child who goes into a bookshop and pulls out everything and makes a mess and is completely a child herself. So you must excuse me for that. Uh, I'm very, very happy to introduce all of you to this book, which has been, it's called Children's Books, An Indian Story, which is a collection of critical writings on uh, children's literature in India, uh, focusing largely post-independence. Uh, and the reason for that is one, I mean, more material is available post-independence. And, if you go into the history of children's literature in India, there's not that much published. There is published material, but over the last, say, 3 or 4 decades, there's been a lot of work happening in this area. Uh, the reason for, I mean, there have been the occasional articles and discussions about children's books in India over many years. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, a couple of publications are also available, but they are dated. Now, if you look around, you go into any bookstore, you will find that although not all publishers are represented, and bookstores do not necessarily carry, or rather what bookstores remain, they do not necessarily carry the best books or all the books, all the titles. You will still find it to be a kind of a buzzing area in the bookstore. That's because there's been a lot of publishing happening in the last, I would say, last 25 to 30 years, especially in the last 20 years. One of the reasons for this is, if I may venture to say, the higher, better international standard levels of production. So the books, just as we are all dressing better, I think, irrespective of where we may belong, books are also dressing better. Books for children are also looking better. Production quality has improved dramatically, with innovations in printing technology and all of that. Plus, the fact that more and more designers are getting involved in the production of books, just as they're getting involved in so many other areas of our lives. So, so they're attractive. So there's the market for children's books has grown. And simultaneously, in the last 3 decades, definitely, there has been an awareness of the need to get children to read, and not just leave it to parents or school libraries to get them to read. So NGOs have got involved in at that, say about 25, 30 years ago, they began to get involved in the distribution, in the reaching of books to children, particularly uh, picture books, because these picture books target the youngest age groups, and that's the best place to start. So that's how, the demand for more and more picture books happened simultaneously with better printing technology. Then gradually, when people in the industry, particularly people in the NGO sector, realized that not, the regular publishers were not able to provide them with enough books, for distribution, they began to produce books themselves. Now, initially, this created a bit of a stumble in in the industry, because, like, again, as with everything else, you need expertise. It's not like you wake up one morning and decide, oh, I'm going to write a story for children, and then you write it, and then, you just slap it all together and a book is produced. It takes a lot more than that, as all of us who have worked with children's books realize. So slowly, they also began to, get their acts together and set up separate publishing units in their own NGOs. And so that is how, and while that happened, a lot of small independent publishers also began to, let down roots and started creating truly extraordinary books. I mean, when the NBT, the National Book Trust, was set up in 1957 or so, they had a very dynamic editor heading the team, and they produced some beautiful books. But because it continues to be a state supported institution, their pricing is, in market terms, quite ridiculous. You could get books for 8 rupees and 10 rupees with, of course, at that time, poor printing, but today, much better printing. But even so, they are able to produce books and have them translated into different languages. And I don't know how good the distribution remains, but it used to be very good at one time because they would take the books by bus to remote areas. I don't think they do that anymore because they hold, but there are lots of other people engaged in this. So even though small independent publishers came up, they were not able to create reach, rather. They were not able to reach the books to as many people as they could. Some bold publishers put their money where their mouths were, so to speak, and they started to simultaneously publish in 7 or 8 Indian languages, taking one main text and translating it into different languages. A couple of others did something even more unique. They started to produce dual language books. So you have the text running in 2 languages simultaneously. That effort has its own challenges, but it helps a child reach, and the teacher reach, one language through a familiar language. All these are and then you had other publishers who, innovated with production, innovated with approach. Others worked with other, they collaborated to create books. They had seminars and teams of people created books. So there's so much happening. So we felt that it's apart from everything else, I think reading is a fundamental right. And children having access to good books is their fundamental right. So, keeping this in mind and looking at all the work that's happening in the industry, in the field, we felt it was time to, some of us were sort of brainstorming, and we felt it was time to look at what's happening, what what has been achieved, what is happening now, what do we need to do, all of that. So that is how, we held meetings with people who are experts in their fields, people who represented the NGO sector, librarians, teachers, some very interested parents, and writers, illustrators, publishers. And we brainstormed over several sessions and came up with the idea of producing a book that would talk about various issues concerning children's literature. So this has a set of articles that cover various issues. It is not comprehensive because there's so much to be said, and this is already, in my mind, too thick a book as it is. It's more than 400 pages now. So we hope that we will be able to produce another a second volume, and continue the work that's being done here. The other thing I would like to mention right off is that although the effort was to represent children's books in different languages, because India, in that sense, we are such a unique society, a society that we should be proud of, our multicultural, multilingual, pluralistic society that's being attacked from all sides, but which we need to hold on to. We wanted to create a book that would talk about what's happening in different languages, or at least in a few languages. We were not able to do that in this volume for several reasons that I don't want to go into right now. But we hope that we will be able to make good that lapse in the next. So this book talks largely about what's happening in the English language. However, some of the authors of the chapters have referred to the languages they are comfortable in. So there is one author who talks refers to what's happening in Malayalam. There's another author who refers to what's happening in Kannada. There's somebody else who talks about what's happening in Hindi. So there are, okay, and Bengali. So there are occasional references, but it is not comprehensive. So that is one major lacuna here that we are aware of. And my co-editor, Dr. Shailaja Menon, is an expert. She is just fantastic, and I wish she could be here. Uh, she teaches. She teaches children's literature. She teaches educators. She works at the grassroots level. I'm a I'm a practitioner. I mean, I my evolution as a writer for children has been more by instinct than anything else, and a passion for books and for getting children to read. So we had two different approaches to this book. She had the academic approach, and I had the hands-on approach. So we had these little tussles, but we had a nice. There was a good energy flowing between the two of us, and I hope that is reflected in the book. Uh, so that anybody who picks it up, whether you're an academic, whether you're a student, whether you're a young adult, whether you're a librarian, you should be able to pick it up and read and understand. So we wanted to convey to those interested in the subject, and also we wanted to convey to them the very many issues that revolve around the idea and uh, and children in the idea of literature, the idea of children's literature, and the idea of children's literature in India. I think that context is very, very important. So that's what we've tried to do in this book. So that's by way of an introduction to this book. So I would be happy to take it along as you ask questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sandhya ma'am, for giving us an overview of what is happening in children's literature, how all the stakeholders are making their efforts to increase the readership among children. Now, let me start with a question. What inspired you to compile and edit this children's books, An Indian Story? And who do you think it will address, or who the readership would be for this book?
Like I said, the readership is one, those involved in children's books, whether they are publishers, authors, illustrators, translators, even distributors, I hope. Then there are universities that that offer children's literature as a course, off and on, not necessarily continuously in India, but somewhere there seems to be some awareness that it is important to look at this, but it hasn't really taken hold as yet. But we hope that universities will take it seriously and get interested. We hope that those who are curious will look at this book. So people, educators, teachers, people, for instance, working in smaller towns, among children, librarians, for instance, so all of these people, this book addresses all of them. They may find, like, some people might find some aspects interesting, some will find some other aspects interesting. Translators will maybe be piqued by what three translators in fact have come together to write a chapter for this book, so they'll be piqued by what they have to say. So yes, all these are all the people that we hope to address. uh, mm, and like I said earlier, the reason for this book is we felt it was time to take stock. It's like it's say over the last 60 years, where have we come, how far have we come along, where do we stand, and where do we go from here. And we want children's literature to be taken seriously, because it is serious business. Writing for children is not child's play. It's, you can't just because you have, many people come to us and say, for instance, if I'm a publisher, I have had people come and say, I've always told my child bedtime stories, so I thought I could convert it into a story. I mean, you may have a good idea, but to actually convert it into a book, it's as serious business as putting together this anthology, as well, if I may dare to say, as serious as writing King Lear. I mean, yeah.
Right. There is very interesting question in the Q&A section by Kanchan Vaidya. How has your childhood influenced the themes and style in your work, especially in your first story?
In what I wrote, you're saying.
Yes.
Oh, that was a direct influence because I was like a lot of other children. I grew up listening to a lot of stories from my grandmothers. One grandmother told one story all the time. The other grandmother told me lots of stories. And the first story that I did write, Eki Doki, which is a take on Ek Keswali, Don Keswali, that's the one story my paternal grandmother used to tell. So the whole family knew that story. But I didn't like the way in her telling, she would always punish the Don Keswali girl. So, I mean, I tried to not change it, but soften the blow, so to speak. Yeah, so that's a direct influence. Listening to stories and trying to share that story. Because when I started working with Tulika Publishers, and the person who started it, Radhika Menon, is a good friend. So we used to talk children's books all the time. But you can't start a children's book publishing company without stories, without books. So, that story came to be written for that.
Yeah. Sandhya ma'am, what do you think? In what way the contemporary Indian stories, they are different from what the books were produced earlier in earlier decades? How are they different?
Uh, I would say that some some stories are different, but many stories are similar. See, sometimes the basic concerns that human beings have remain the same, remain constant. The context changes, you know, and depending upon culture and history and geography and all of that. But if I were to answer this question in broad strokes, I would say that many themes that you wouldn't even dream of discussing, earlier, are being talked about today, whether be it homosexuality, or be it divorce, or be it adoption. There were always some topics, or death. They were always earlier. We were always like adults were like gatekeepers. You can tell children certain stories, but you can't tell children certain other stories. But now that barrier, that line seems to be slowly disappearing. Having said that, personally, I believe that since creating books for children is intended to open up their minds and to entertain them. So we need to. I believe in stories that give children joy, that give children hope. I think hope and the freedom to dream and to have self belief. I think these qualities are important. So, any kind of story that gives a child that sort of uh, feeling is what I would believe in. Having said that, again, when it comes to children's books in India, there is this binary that we are working with, that is literacy on the one hand and literature on the other hand, because of the levels of illiteracy in our country and the great lengths to which we have to go in order to get give all children these opportunities to access books. You can never it's very hard to separate the two. So it is only very few people who are who have that talent, who can write or who can draw or who can create. But for the most part, there is this binary that we exist with.
Right. Uh, Madam, we have a question by Dr. Hari Babu. He says that he is afraid that we are restricting stories only for children And can you throw some light on the importance of stories to teach language to UG students and the impact on adults?
I think a good children's book, even if it is a picture book, is for everybody. I mean, to separate this in your mind that this is for a child and this is for an adult, I think that is a misunderstood, misconceived notion. For instance, to give you an example, when a personal example, when my son was studying, preparing for his 12th board exams, he had this little book with him always. It's called Max's Bath. It's by Rosemary Wells. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's a very simple board book with very few words. It does just talks about a little girl helping her little brother take a bath. He's a mess and she's giving him a bath. And at the end of it, he is nice and clean, but she is a mess. Okay. That's the story. Max's bath. He used to love that. So, and in between studying whatever physics, chemistry, or whatever it is that he was studying, he would look at this book and chuckle over it. And many people, myself included, occasionally will pick up a children's book that I like and start reading it. So I don't think so. A good children's book is for life. It really is for life. It's just that we have these notions in our head and we compartmentalize. Just like any other book that you love. For instance, if I say I love this book by Paul Gallico called Love of Seven Dolls, and I can read it every now and then. I can read another book written by a young Indian author called Soumya Rajendran. The book is called The Snow King's Daughter. It's so brilliant that every now and then I pick it up and I read it. The thing is to look at children's books, to look not just as objects for our children to read, but as something that we can derive. And because a lot of children's books do embody these qualities of these that give you energy, like hope and compassion and whatever, all of those things, they're good for us too. It doesn't matter how old or how young you are. There is this book by Devashish Makhija uh, uh, called Oonga. I thought I had it in my shelf. I've given it to someone to read. Uh, it was a film that he made about a little tribal boy in an Odisha village. And it's a paperback. It's brilliant, and which he then wrote as a book. Devashish Makhija is a filmmaker. So this paperback is visual. And I think that's a book. It is classified as a book for young adults, but it is a book for everybody. When Charles Dickens wrote, everybody read his books. It was not like, and all of us, we read these books when we were 12 and 13 years old, and we continue to study them in colleges, right? So that's the thing about books. So that applies equally to picture books and across the, range, across the ages.
Okay, thank you, Sandhya ma'am. Now, I'd like to know how well do the Indian textbooks or children's book reflect the diverse realities and experiences of Indian children? Can they really relate to it? Or are they
You're talking about textbooks. I'm not really in a position to uh, answer that with any authority because I haven't looked at textbooks, over the last, I don't know how many years. But I do know that increasingly, many of these textbook publishers are looking at extracts from published children's books to use in their compilations. Okay, so if that is an indication, I think it's a good thing, and uh, and since, as for diversity, there is a lot of diversity. That it's true that many books, and if we are speaking about books in the English language, many or majority of the books are written by people with English speaking background, from the middle and upper middle classes who may not have had certain kinds of experience, because there's this whole debate about, can you write about something that you are not familiar with? If you are not a Dalit, can you write about a Dalit, condition or story, or a tribal or whatever, anything. So there is this whole debate that's going on. So, and it is true that many of these books are written by uh, middle and upper middle class individuals. But what's to stop your imagination from creating a world that is believable, or that exists believably on its own? When I say believable, I don't rule out uh, make believe and fantasy. When I say believable, I mean the world that you create in a book has integrity. The characters have integrity. The things that happen have worked together, and there is a logic there. It may not necessarily be realistic, right? So I feel uh, if so, you need to look at it like that. So to that extent, I think there is representation, but there's a lot more lot more genuine, real voices that need to emerge. They are emerging slowly, very slowly. They are emerging, but not fast enough. So we need to work towards that.
Uh, Ma'am, have Indian authors developed distinctive voices in children's literature, or are there still struggles in this area?
A few people have succeeded in finding their voices. Many are still struggling, because there is this uh, when it works, when they pull it off, you can hear their voices, when it's a really good piece of writing. And I would apply this to images as well, where the illustrator has managed to capture, the reality of that story, of that voice. It works well. But we do have a tendency to assume a talking down voice when we address children. Uh, and that is what detracts from the quality of a book. We take this very prescriptive attitude, that we are the adults, we know, and we teach. So very often, even through our stories, we may be falling into the trap of teaching rather than telling or sharing a story. So there is that, and I think a lot of the stories many of the books tend to fall into that category. But a few people, like I mentioned Soumya Rajendran a little while ago, I think she has a fantastic voice. Then there is this wonderful writer from Bhopal called Rinchin. She has a very, very strong voice. Then you have Ranjit Lal, who comes from a very English speaking background, but his stories are very powerful, and he is talking about a certain section of society, but it's a powerful voice. Then you have Shabnam Minwala, you know. So there are, and when it comes to illustrations, you have Priya Kurian, who is amazing. Then you have an Atanu Roy, whose work over the last 40 years has just been so amazing. You have Rajiv Aib, and you have, I'd just like to show you this because I love this book so much. It's a book called, it's a wordless picture book. Can you see it? It's a wordless picture book called Snip. Of course, you'll see it the other way, but anyway. And it's by Kanato Jimo, who is from Nagaland. And he evokes that whole mountain world of two children, like two children anywhere else. So it's a story set in a specific area, but which anybody could read and enjoy and interpret, because it's wordless. That's the other advantage children's books have. You can create wordless picture books like this one by Manjula Padmanabhan, A Visit to the City Market, which was published by NBT first, I think, in I don't know, long back, and it's been reprinted 15, 20 times. And you can see this is an old edition, so the printing is poor, but the printing quality has improved over the years. Again, this is a wordless picture book. And clearly it's popular because, look at the number of times it's been reprinted. I can show you one more example of a book published by NBT, of which I have lost the front and back cover. It was in Urdu. It's by Miki Patel, again a wordless picture book called Procession. So, and since this is the Urdu edition, it goes the other way. So 2, 3, 4, 5, it goes like that. So that is the enduring quality of books like these, who sort of crossed that barrier. But yes, I would say only a few people have managed to really find their voices, to be honest.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am, showing us so many books that can help the young parents in India. Now, can you please highlight some significant accomplishments in Indian children's literature as discussed in your work or in your book?
Like I said, a lot of young people are writing today. A lot of young people are illustrating today. In fact, a lot of young people have discovered that this can be a profession. Earlier, it was always considered a hobby. I mean, I used to always be asked by various, what is it you actually do? But tell me, what is it you do? Okay, books, children, what is it you do? You go to work every day, but where do you go? What do you do? Those are the kind of questions people couldn't understand, that there is such a world and that it bears as much hard work and putting together and routine and all of that as anything else. But I think that notion is slowly changing. So it's being recognized definitely as a profession, both by writers as well as by illustrators. And I think also there is much greater awareness, not only of the need for children's books, but of the power that children's books wield, and the power that this can give, how enabling it can be, this power, how enabling it can be to children who need that. And I'm not talking only about, children of various socio-economic levels. I'm talking about a child, different kinds of children with different levels of confidence or lack of confidence, how this can be empowering. I think these are very important aspects. I believe that uh, many people are working towards building public libraries, and trying to establish mohalla libraries, trying to because India's we certainly cannot be proud of our library movement, though there has been we've understood the importance, we've realized the importance of libraries. I'm afraid not. It's taken a long time for even for schools to have decent libraries. It's only the more progressive schools that really have good libraries. So, but I think the library movement is growing, the reading movement is growing slowly, and the reading movement in children's own languages, because the number of publishers who are taking the uh, you know what shall I say, not necessarily monetarily uh, sensible step of producing in different languages. For instance, they may do just, if they have a print run of 5,000 books in English, they may do, say, 500 in Bengali, or 1,000 or 2,000 in Hindi, and 250 in Tamil, 250 in Malayalam. Now, those are not particularly monetizing factors, but they are willing to stick their necks out and do it and push the book. So that, again, I think is a big, big step in reaching. So recently, some books have been published in specific languages of the Northeast, and books published in Santhali, for instance, in some tribal languages as well. Of course, some don't have scripts, but for them, wordless books work really, really well. Or they may use the books in an alternative language. So yeah, I think these are the positives that emerge from what people have to say in this book.
Amazing. It's very good to know that the readership is growing and people are taking efforts. One such effort I'd like to mention here, that the English Language Teachers Association of India, LTI, has taken up an initiative of India Reads, and it is taking momentum. They are encouraging people or children to read a lot, and that's taking wonderful momentum now. Ma'am, I'd like to understand, what role do publishers, authors, illustrators, or even educators play in shaping the landscape of Indian children's literature?
Crucial. They are there, starting with parents. Like I said, I mean, you need writers who write well to create books. You need illustrators who put them together. You need publishers with a vision to put these, to publish these books, even some difficult books, on difficult themes. But if the publisher has faith, and then you need the distributor to take the books there, you need educators to look at these books, to recognize them and to recommend them, and to take, you have NGOs, working in the informal sector, who actually carry books as far as they can travel, and share the books with the children and get their responses, get them to engage. So I think at every level, I mean, it's absolute, without cooperation at all these levels, it's not possible. You need translators. For instance, one of the things I feel that's important to do is to translate not just from English, but to actually to make available content originally in Indian languages, and translate from one Indian language to another. Because language, any language is not just about words or vocabulary, though, though those are important. It's about a whole culture, a whole way of life. Even, like one illustrator who had been given an assignment, in which she had to draw a farmer. So she said, what kind of farmer should I draw? A farmer from Tamil Nadu, a farmer from Punjab, a farmer from Bihar? The story was a kind of a general story. But she says, where should I locate it? So, so when you translate, you're not just translating words, you're not just translating the story, you're translating a whole way of life. And only then, if you're able to do that, can you can you help children make connections, and can you represent the story adequately? I'm not even saying well, I'm saying only then can you represent it adequately. Like a village in Andhra Pradesh is very different from a village, say, in Kerala, even though they are supposedly two southern states. And definitely very different from a village in Maharashtra, very different from a village in Haryana, or you go to Arunachal Pradesh, very different. So there's that, So I think unless everyone pulls their weight, and don't forget bookstores. I mean, unless bookstores and promoters of books give these books publicity in visibility, not publicity, visibility, and recognize that they are important, and not only the international bestsellers and this and that, and create spaces where you will find typically all these children's books, and especially when it comes to picture books, they're all thin books. So if you sort of pile them, like if you just stack them together, you can't even see what the books are. So you have to develop ways of even displaying books so that the front covers are seen, and that attracts a readership. So yes, so at all these different levels you have, and then I think it's very important for libraries, especially in schools, for librarians to be readers themselves. I have met many librarians who do not read at all. They just do the job. So they'll open up a class for children from class 4 come to the library. They'll open up that shelf with certain books. And I've had children say, those are just such baby books. I can't read. I've read all of them. I want to read something else. So they won't even open up the entire library to those children. It's important for them to read aloud to children, because listening in India, our children are losing the capacity to listen. Everybody talks, but nobody listens. That's a very important thing. And that's something learning to read can help you with. So read aloud is important, and getting illustrators and writers and translators into schools to talk to them, not just storytellers, but book readers. There's a difference. People are happy to have storytellers. I'm glad storytelling is coming back in vogue, but it's easy. Then you just sit back and listen to a story. It's like watching television. But reading reading with somebody, that's a slightly different ball game, and that's important too.
Right. So this is one of the last questions. So, looking at all the things that you have talked about, what are your hopes for the future of children's literature in India?
I feel I'm impressed with the number of young people who write, who are not just write, who express themselves clearly and boldly and unequivocally. And I think the future is looking bright. But like I said, it's important that we have writers writing in their own languages. I'm not saying you have to write about your own concerns. I'm saying when you write in your own language, then other things also follow. It's like uh, thinking in English, thinking in Marathi, thinking in Hindi, whatever. There is a difference, in the way that you think, depending upon which language you're most comfortable with. So the future is bright, but we do need strong, bold voices. I'd like to just show you one last book, which is written by the famous Mahashweta Devi. Now, she was an iconoclast, okay, and she worked with tribals, and she did this book called The YY Girl, about a tribal girl. It's based on a girl who she met, who asked a lot of questions like, uh, why is it my brother can go to school and why can't I? Why do I have to take the babu's goats to graze? Why can't my brother do it? Why does school start at whatever time, 9 o'clock? It should start at 11 so that I can also come after I finish all the work at home. So the YY girl. And this book was picked up by various schools in various states. But this is a few years ago. Shivraj Chauhan was chief minister of Madhya Pradesh then. This book was banned. This book, children's book, was banned in Madhya Pradesh. So no school there was allowed to stock it. That's the power that a good children's book can have. And it continues to be a bestseller because the ideas are so dynamic and so relevant. That's what a good book does. That's what any good book does. And definitely a good children's book does. And definitely it stays with you all your life. I mean, you can go back to it and read it, look at the pictures and enjoy it as much as you did, or maybe even better. Like a little, I do sometimes do writing workshops with children. And one 9-year-old, she told me that her mother cannot understand. My mother cannot understand why I keep reading this book over and over again. Ma'am, every time I read this book, I discover something new in it. A 9-year-old told me this. So you see how, you don't need to be a PhD in English literature or Hindi literature to have these kind of insights,
Very true, Sandhya. That the good books, they stay with us for lifelong. Thank you so much for sharing your valuable insights and experiences with us today. It has been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. I'm sure our audience also have found this session very enlightening and inspiring as we have found it.
Thank you so much. It's been when I start talking about children and children's books, I can't stop. So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. And yeah, this book is available to whomever wants to